Alright, hello everyone. Welcome in. You got Spark here. Good to see you guys. And thank you for stopping by the video. Now, I would like to do a slight preamble here because this is my first time doing this sort of thing and I want to explain what's happening here, especially since this is on the podcast channel, which is, up to this point, been mostly nothing but podcast. But I want to do a little thing on the side here that I'm going to be calling Sparks Notes, and what that's going to be is me just doing little rants about, subjects that might interest me, that are a little off the usual topics from the podcast, things we either don't talk about or only talk about a little bit. I might get into a little more detail, so that's what we're going to be trying to do here. Also, it's going to be pretty much entirely off the cuff. I'm going to try and do this without a script and just see how it goes, see if I can keep a solid flow in the conversation as I'm trying to explain my thoughts and opinions on things. So we're just going to see how that goes. And with all that out of the way, I suppose I'll just get right into it. So, from the top, proper introduction. Welcome in, everybody. You got Spark here, and I have been taking some notes. So, what I want to talk about today, as you could probably tell from the image over here on the side, is the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Now see, something kind of interesting has been happening with this, right? Because whenever like a big FromSoft thing comes out, usually typically Souls related, but I'm pretty sure this conversation also happened with Armored Core, but whenever FromSoft does pretty much anything, the difficulty conversation comes back up, right? And it's usually people who are a little more on the casual side of gaming, or people who have like no experience with Souls games at all, complaining about how things are too hard, how the game needs like a whole dedicated easy mode just to get them through it and all that, and the Souls veterans on the other side saying, nah, that's stupid, you can't have an easy mode, that goes against the whole soul of the Souls series, right? But something kind of interesting happened this time where it wasn't quite as clear a divide as it usually is. This time it ended up being, people who actually play Souls games, and a lot of Souls veterans, saying that maybe things went a little too far this time. As was made pretty evident by the mixed reviews over on the Steam side of things, like how it went from positive, I think it was overwhelmingly positive, but it was at least positive, but it ended up shifting a whole category into mixed, so that was pretty interesting. Now, it does bear saying that some of that was because of the fact that the game was apparently having some performance issues on PC, so there is some of that, but there was also a lot of conversation around difficulty. Now, I myself, alongside Rosa, who is the other co-host of the podcast, as you may or may not already know, have played through a fair amount of the Erdtree DLC at this point. A good, I'd say, 10-15 hours or so. We've been running around a good bit. And I will say that I think I might be agreeing with the fact that things were a little excessive at first going in, on release. And I would like to explain myself on that, because I know some of you are already shaking your heads, poo-pooing on my opinion on this one. But if I may explain, I just think that in terms of difficulty, the Souls series, it needs to find a really good balance, right? And that balance can be hard to strike as time goes on, with more the Souls players having done more and more of these Souls series games, right? And getting better and better at them, and at a point it's just like, what most people would still consider pretty difficult, these guys might just be cleaning right through pretty easily, just because they're so used to it at this point. Now, obviously, FromSoft is a bit of a challenge on their hands, trying to keep the challenge level fresh, trying to give people that classic Souls experience, that same thing they got back when they were playing Demon Souls or Dark Souls 1, and try and keep that fresh in them without, going over the top. Now, this time, I think they might have pushed just a little too far towards that cliff. And what I believe that to be is like, the whole thing with like Skidoo tree fragments and, all of that, trying to rebalance everything for the DLC, because obviously people have been playing the game for 2 years now. A lot of people have overtuned their characters crazily, and, trying to put everyone on the same level by using the Skidoo tree fragments. I can sort of get what they were going for with that, but at the same time, just the way they scaled the enemies and everything, like the fact that the moment we go in and fight our first boss, me and Rosa going into that little crypt that's not too far from the entrance to the, I think they actually call it the Shadow Realm, which is pretty funny, but the Shadow Realm, and that first guy that we walked into is just a dude in armor, right? But we go in to fight that guy, and it's like, I got a relatively well-built character, like 40 vitality, almost, like somewhere between 40 and 50, right? The fact that I end up getting hit once and dying instantly, right? It does seem like maybe a little bit much. And again, I do get the feeling that people are going to bring up the Skidoo fragments again. It's like, oh, just, you know, explore more, get more fragments, you'll be able to even it out. But at a point, it's like, I get that they were just trying to get people to explore, but people were gonna explore anyway. And as far as like trying to even out the playing field, like, it seems kind of unnecessary with the way Souls games work in general, right? Because there's always been ways to make it easier or harder, right? You can run the game with no armor at Soul level 1 with a broken sword or whatever. If you want to make it easier, you can bring your summons in, you can over level, all that good stuff, right? But I feel like the problem is finding that nice midpoint, right? The baseline, where people feel like they still have a whole lot of options without having to rely on things like Rivers of Blood or just the bleed status in general, you know, Scarlet Rod, all that sort of thing. You know, it's just nice to feel like you're not quite being forced into playstyles that you might not necessarily want to do, but might just be generally easier and less, you know, irritating. Because like me, I don't mind a hard fight, but it's all about trying to find the place where it's reasonable before it gets to be just, you know, overly irritating, like unreasonable. Exactly is what I mean to say. And I just feel like there's room in the conversation for some nuance here. And I do believe that, you know, obviously FromSoft agrees to this point where they gotten, you know, that patch in that ended up adjusting the Skidoo tree fragments to give a little more percentage in terms of damage and damage mitigation and all that good stuff. So I feel like I'm already coming at this kind of late, and this is sort of a moot point since they've already gone ahead and adjusted it. But even then, it's like just the way the community kind of handled this whole thing feels like we're leaning a little bit too much into this masochist mentality, right? And I worry for the Soul series going forward, if this sort of mentality persists and FromSoft keeps leaning into it. I feel like maybe we can try to lean more towards something challenging but reasonable, right? As opposed to just being, again, masochistic. And I think maybe the Souls community has some room to grow and evolve in being able to have this conversation without immediately pushing people out and, you know, calling them noobs with the get goods and all that stuff, right? It's like, again, this is coming from a guy who's played pretty much every Souls game on the list up until this point. I've done my getting good, all right? I've been there, I've done that. But it just seems like maybe we can soften the blows here just a tad. And it's funny, the thing that made me kind of want to talk about this whole thing in the first place was actually a bit with Asmongold, right? As you all probably know that name, seen his face before. He'd been working through the Erdtree DLC as well, and he had some thoughts on it, which I'd like to briefly share here just to kind of illustrate my point, right? So let's look at that real quick.
I think that it's just gotten worse, to be honest. What ends up happening with me is that, like, and I think that this, like, streaming definitely makes it, like, way worse, right? Because it's like I play the game and I struggle at the game and everybody says that I'm a piece of shit, right? So it's like, it's almost like I can't lose because everybody is waiting to, like, hate me for losing. And, like, it makes it very unenjoyable. I feel like I can't learn games on stream because people are constantly calling me stupid or trying to, like, give me bad information or insulting me. And to be honest, I don't like dealing with that. I hate that. I don't like being insulted or berated or people being rude to me or anything like that. And so if that happens to me and I'm like, I ask myself, it does genuinely bother me. I really don't like it. And because of that, I can't really deal with that level of, like, frustration at all. I can't deal with it. I can't. And I've tried for years.
And so on. You kind of get the point. So it's just the sort of thing where it feels like the Souls community can maybe be a little too harsh with all this sort of thing when it comes down to this difficulty conversation. So I feel like maybe we could all stand to take a step back and look at this a little more objectively, right? And especially just kind of, you know, as far as like trying to, you know, get more people in on the Souls series. And I don't mean like, you know, being so accommodating that you're just like, you know, you're actually advocating for the easy mode, but like if people are doing their best and they're trying hard and they're just maybe not the best at video games, you know, maybe you just cut them a little slack in general. Again, this is kind of why I wanted to talk about this whole thing in the first place. It's like maybe we can all stand to just ease back, ease up a little bit, look at this a little more reasonably, and, you know, come to a better conclusion here. That's all I'm saying. Oh, and I suppose I should touch on the whole thing with Alana, which is like the most recent issue with the whole Souls difficulty debacle, right? Now, I will agree that her phrasing was probably not the best with the whole, you know, situational disability thing. Like that's taking it a bit far, right? Calling it a disability is a bit much. You just have kids, right? I mean, if you got time, like put them down for a nap, get a nanny, whatever you gotta do. But like, don't call it a disability. You're being ridiculous. But I will say, in terms of like the thing about the pause button, I don't think that's too bad an idea, right? I don't think that's too unreasonable, especially if we're talking about, you know, you're playing single player mode, you're playing offline, you're doing your own thing without, you know, dealing with other players at all. Yeah, absolutely, just put a pause button in there. And why I say that is like, I know that there is, of course, the thing where you can go in your menu, go to your crafting, and that kind of effectively pauses the game, but there's already like a really good way of going about this, right? Because like your map button, right? If you like, I play on PlayStation, so I don't know what like PC or Xbox or anybody else does. Map button's on your little touchpad, but it's completely deactivated when you're in combat, right? So instead of just completely deactivating it, why not make it a pause button when you're in combat? That's all. That's what I'm saying. Like, why not just do that then? I think that would be reasonable. I mean, again, as long as you're offline and not playing with somebody else, because obviously that kind of mucks things up a bit. But if you're playing the game from a fully like single player perspective, yeah, just make the map button a pause button in combat. Seems simple enough to me. But that's just my thoughts and opinions on the matter. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I really have to say about it. But maybe you have something to say about it. And if you do, why not drop some notes of your own in the comment section and we can compare. But if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more, because I do plan on doing some more of these as we go ahead and drop a sub. And, you know, come check us out on the podcast every Wednesday at 6 p.m. PST. Would love to see you there. And with that all being said, hey, make sure to take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. Until we meet again, later.